Hello lovely people, welcome to another book chat, the regular roundup of stuff I've read at some point. I've got 4 books I want to talk about. I'm just going to crack on.
Sophie Vlogs.
I'm going to kick things off with a book I read on my Kindle. That is The Vanishing Stair by Maureen Johnson. This is the second book in the Truly Devious series, which is set at Ellingham Academy, which is an academy that's built like on this mountain in the 30s by this guy. Someone kidnaps his wife and child, murders someone who's attending the school there. It's this big unsolved mystery. And we follow Stevie, who is attending the school in contemporary time and has been trying to solve this mystery. The thing about this series is I found the ending of the first book very unsatisfying because I felt like I acknowledged the fact that we weren't going to solve the Ellingham mystery in the first book. I understand that it's a trilogy. I felt cheated out of the solution for the contemporary plotline. So I decided to read this second book anyway. Let's just see what happens. And I definitely enjoy reading this series. I find it immensely readable. I speed through these 2 books. I've sped through them. It's just, I also feel like it could just have been 1 book or 2 books. Because again, I feel like we've finished this second book and I still have all of these unanswered things going into the 3rd book, and I'm going to be really interested to see if they're able to be answered in a way that will make me satisfied, or if I'm going to come away from the whole thing still feeling like it could have been at most a duology. I will say I do still really enjoy the sort of atmosphere of Ellingham. In my head it's autumn all the time there. I imagine it in autumn. It kind of taps into that, and I don't know if you would class this series as dark academia, but that thing that I kind of associate with dark academia where it's a school with some darkness and some mystery and that kind of thing. And there's lots of aspects of how Ellingham works that is really interesting, with these ideas of these the vanishing stair is a thing, and riddles and things built into the houses or the campus that are to be discovered and unseen and that kind of thing. So there's lots of aspects of this I find really interesting. I think another thing that I definitely stumble over with this series is I could not care any less about the romance. I do not understand the appeal. I think that the romantic interest in this is such a dickhead, and I really actually dislike him. I don't know if that's popular or unpopular as an opinion. So all of those passages to do with that romantic relationship, couldn't care less about. All of the stuff to do with actually trying to solve the mystery, very intrigued. I think for me my enjoyment of this series will really hinge upon how the 3rd book is executed. Moving on, I also read The Witch in the Wood by T.H. White, which is the 2nd book in the Once and Future King series. One thing I find so fascinating about this so far is I feel like T.H. White's Once and Future King series is an incredibly iconic take on the Arthurian stories, and yet so far I feel like he writes around all of the most well-known aspects of the story, which is fascinating to me. So the first book is you follow Wart, but you follow him as a child with Merlin sort of tutoring him, and they just have all of these little adventures of doing different things, oh, now he's been transformed into a bird of prey, let's do that for a bit. And then it ends with him pulling the sword out of the stone. And with this one, again, time has passed, Arthur is now an older guy, and it opens after a battle, and Merlin is discussing the battle with Arthur and essentially trying to get Arthur to think about morals and how maybe war is not good, or how do you justify war? And he's trying to get him to really think about all of these really philosophical questions. And then also the other plotline of this is Morgose's children, whose names we know because they become Knights of the Round Table. It's just sort of them as children. I think they're on Orkney, if I remember correctly. Just sort of having these escapades. And so there's this really weird tonal thing happening where you have there is war brewing because the people who oppose Arthur's rule are clashing with him, and so Arthur is having to prepare for battles and that kind of thing. You have these children, having both innocent and quite dark adventures. There's an entire plotline to do with hunting a unicorn, which is very light-hearted initially, but becomes very dark. And then there's this third one, which is to do with this guy who we've already met, Sir Pellinor, in the first book, who is hunting this creature who comes across, and his presence in the text is comic. It is funny. It is in some ways a little bit absurd, that kind of thing. And so there's this very strange, like, tonal conflict between different aspects of the story. He's like resolutely refusing to explore any of like the best known beats of the story. Like, this culminates in one of the most famous aspects, which is Arthur sleeping with his sister, or his half sister, and then like the conception of Mordred. But it's like so passingly mentioned at the end, and Merlin spends the whole book being like, God, there's really something I need to remember to tell Arthur, but I just don't remember. So I'm like, I gave it 3 stars because I read it and I was like, interesting, and I was like, it was fine and I enjoyed reading it, but I didn't feel like moved by it. And then the more I've sat with it, the more I've been like, it's such an interesting approach to writing about this like story cycle. So I really, obviously I have this whole bind-up, so I will be continuing with the series. It kind of perplexes me in some ways, but I feel enticed by it. So, I'm really interested to explore these further. If you're someone who has read this series, like, I would love to hear your thoughts on it in general. Please don't spoil anything past this second book, because I have to read the rest. But, yeah, really, God, I have feelings. My final fiction book before I go into non-fiction is If Cats Disappeared from the World by Genki Kawamura, which I picked this up secondhand, and I didn't really know a lot about it, but I'd heard good things. I've given this a 2 stars. I don't know if that's me being harsh. I think it was a bit too saccharine for me. Essentially, we followed this guy who's just been diagnosed with cancer, and he knows he's going to die soon, and the devil comes to him, and he's like, look, I can give you an extra day of life, but each day I have to pick something that will disappear from the world. And so he picks the different things each day, and he also gives this guy the opportunity to like experience them one last time before they go. And one of these things that he picks is cats, as the title suggests. So this is really like this guy just kind of like reflecting on his life in some ways. And I understand that there are a lot of people who read this who feel like this really talks about like what is important in life and what truly matters and that kind of thing. I think for me, I found the characterization quite shallow insofar as I found it very difficult to care for this guy, because like he meets up with an old flame and he just doesn't remember anything about her. He doesn't remember the things she likes, the things she dislikes. And he's just like arranges to see her because he feels bad that he's dying and he wants to like get closure with her. And I find it very hard to root for him because he seems very self-absorbed and absorbed in his own sphere, even aside from like processing his death. Like, just the fact that he just can't remember any details about these people who appear to be so important to him and that kind of thing. So I think for me, a lot of the like examination of what really matters about life didn't really work for me because I didn't feel super invested in this guy. It also just like, it was a bit saccharine for me. I tell you what this reminded me of. This reminded me of The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom, which I loved when I read for the first time when I was like, I think I must have been like 15 or something like that. Loved it. Like, cried, gave it 5 stars, whereas I think if I read it now, I wouldn't like it. And I think that's just because it doesn't tie into where I'm at. Like, these types of things that it's mulling over and that this is exploring and that kind of thing, just, they're not things that affect me in the way that they are done here, I think. So this is one that I can understand why people connect to it. It just really didn't work for me, and I think if I'd have connected with the writing style a lot more, then the likelihood of me appreciating the messaging would have been higher. The style was just like very straightforward, and I just didn't gel with this. A book that I really liked, however, is my non-fiction, which is Wordslut, A Feminist Guide to Taking Back the English Language by Amanda Montell. My friend lent me this book because she thought I would like it, and I really did. It was absolutely fascinating. So this is very much like looking at linguistics, looking at language, looking at how language has evolved, and every chapter explores a different thing. So examples would be like gendering of language, languages that have a gendered aspect to them, the ways in which some people are coming up with ways to degender that language was really fascinating, because especially as an English speaker, because we don't have one of the things that I struggle with when trying to learn languages that are gendered is not understanding why certain things are gendered male or gendered female, and also just always wondering who makes that decision. And so I found that chapter really interesting because it like delved into that, which was fascinating. It looks at like the way women talk to each other when men aren't around, the why people who are like try and police grammar very like hard, like why that is a bad thing. It's also very explicitly like inclusive of trans, non-binary, queer, like all of these things. This is very much like a book that is looking through lots of different lenses and opening up the conversation in lots of different ways. And essentially, I just found this absolutely fascinating. It's going to be one of those books that I'm going to constantly want to reference to people, but my memory is bad and I'm probably going to forget all of the anecdotes, so I'll have to read it again at some point. But I found it really, really interesting. I feel like she writes in a way that is very easy to take in what she's saying. Like, she keeps it engaging. She's giving you a lot of like very solid like linguistical knowledge and that kind of thing, but also in a way that is like quite light-hearted and you can take it in really easily. It's not that big, but I feel like it covered so much, and I just found it absolutely fascinating. So I would definitely recommend this book. That's everything I wanted to talk about. As per usual, I would love to hear your thoughts on any of these books. Please do leave a comment down below. Otherwise, I hope you're having a really lovely day, and I will see you next time for something different.